Have you ever stopped to think about what someone would be willing to do for the love of their daughter? This is the story of a simple man who risked everything for a better future. But just when he thought all was lost, a single sentence changed everything. It made an immigration officer cry. Miguel didn't have many options. He left his homeland in El Salvador with a backpack on his back, his daughter in his arms, and a single goal in mind: to offer little Camilla a better future than the one he had. For weeks, they crossed borders, deserts, and checkpoints, facing fear, hunger, and uncertainty. Miguel was not a criminal. He was a bricklayer, a man with calloused hands and a calm demeanor, accustomed to dealing with difficulties without complaining. What he did not expect was that just as he arrived at the destination where he believed he could start over, he would be treated as a threat. At the Houston International Airport, as he handed over his expired passport and improvised documents, tension hung in the air. The immigration officer's gaze became serious. The silence between questions was more frightening than any word spoken. "Sir, please follow us," said the officer in a firm but restrained tone. Miguel obeyed. He did not protest. He just held his sleeping daughter a little tighter in his arms, as if trying to protect her with his own body from the storm that was coming. Inside the reserved immigration room, the atmosphere was cold. Harsh white lights, cameras in every corner. Miguel was instructed to hand over all his belongings, and when he saw his daughter's little doll being taken out of her backpack for inspection, something inside him broke. Camilla woke up scared, looked around, and didn't understand anything. "Daddy?" she asked softly, tears welling up in her eyes. The agent hesitated, looked at the two of them, and did what he had to do. He followed protocol. He separated father and daughter. Miguel was handcuffed and taken to another room. Camila was taken to a temporary social worker, crying and screaming that she wanted to stay with her father. It was just another case, another incident among so many others. But for Miguel, it was everything. It was his life in pieces before his very eyes. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He just stared into space as if trying to understand how a dream could turn into a nightmare in such a short time. Meanwhile, on the agent's computer, the information was being confirmed. Irregular documents, unauthorized entry, suspected illegal stay. Technically, everything indicated that Miguel would be deported within the next 48 hours. The procedure was clear. No exceptions. But the agent hesitated. Something about the situation was different. Perhaps it was the way Miguel remained silent, even though he knew that every minute there brought him closer to being expelled. Or maybe it was the way he hugged his daughter minutes before being separated from her, like someone who knows he won't see her for a long time. Miguel, even in the face of failure, maintained the posture of a protective father. He didn't seem desperate. He seemed determined, and that moved the agent. He had dealt with dozens of similar situations, but rarely had he seen a man so silent, and at the same time so eloquent. The tension mounted. The line of cases in the next room grew longer, but at that moment, it was as if time had stopped for both of them. The system said deportation, but the agent's heart began to question. The clock read 11:42 a.m. when Miguel was led to the last room before deportation. Outside, his daughter was still in temporary care, crying, restless, calling for her father. There, in that cold, windowless room under the merciless fluorescent lights, he was handcuffed. He sat at a metal table in front of two agents, one younger, more technical, who just filled out papers without looking up, the other, a little older, with his eyes fixed on Miguel, as if trying to see beyond the documents. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of keys being pressed. The scene seemed mechanical, impersonal, like so many others in that place. But there was something there that made everything different. Miguel didn't beg. He didn't plead. He didn't say anything. He just watched. His eyes conveyed exhaustion, but also determination. His body was tense but not defeated. It was as if he accepted what was happening, and at the same time, resisted with all his dignity. The older agent, named Robert, decided to break protocol. He looked at Miguel and asked in a lower, more human voice, "Why did you come here, Miguel?" There was a long pause. Miguel slowly raised his eyes. He took a deep breath, and he spoke in a hoarse but firm voice. "I didn't come for myself." Another pause. "I came for her." Robert leaned forward slightly. Miguel continued. "I grew up amid gunshots and fear. I learned to run before I learned to write. I buried friends before I turned 15. If I stayed, my daughter would have the same fate. I don't want her to live looking over her shoulder all the time. I just want her to learn to read, to have a book, a backpack, a playground, to be free. That's all. If you want to send me back, that's fine. Just let me put her in school first. She just wants to learn to be someone better than me." The room fell silent. Even the youngest agent stopped typing. Robert couldn't look away. Those words weren't a request. They were almost a prayer. There was no drama in Miguel's words, but there was a truth so pure, so human, that it disarmed any judgment. The agent had heard many moving stories, some true, some not so true. But there, he saw a man who accepted his own fate as long as his daughter had a chance. A father who was willing to be arrested, humiliated, deported, as long as his daughter had a different life. Robert stood up slowly and said, "Give me a minute." He left the room, walked down the hallway in silence, and stopped in front of the frosted glass window. He leaned against the wall. His chest tightened. His eyes welled up. He tried to take a deep breath but felt the lump in his throat grow. He had 2 daughters, and for the first time he put himself in that man's shoes. If he were him, he would have done the same. Maybe he would have done even more. Robert returned to the room a few minutes later, but something about him had changed. His previously professional gaze now carried a human weight, as if he had crossed an invisible line between duty and conscience. He sat silently in front of Miguel, who was still handcuffed. For a few seconds, the two just stared at each other. Camilla, on the other side of the terminal, remained red-eyed and restless, drawing with crayons on a crumpled sheet of paper that the social worker had given her. The drawing was simple: a house, a sun, and 2 people holding hands. Robert didn't see the drawing, but he seemed to feel it. "Miguel," said the agent in a firm but gentle voice, "you broke the law by trying to enter with invalid documents. That is a fact. But there is something in your story that cannot be measured by stamps or protocols." The silence was thick. "I can't change the system," he continued, "but I can refer your case for humanitarian asylum. It's a difficult path, it takes time. But if everything goes well, you and your daughter may have a real chance here." Miguel didn't understand right away. He was too tired. It took a while for it to sink in. The words "real chance" seemed to echo like a distant bell, almost unbelievable. Robert stood up, carefully removed the handcuffs, and added, "But to do that, you need to go through interviews, prove your story, stay within the law, and above all, protect this girl as you have done so far." Miguel shook his head slowly. He couldn't speak. He just put his hands to his face and began to cry. It wasn't the cry of despair he had held back for days. It was a cry of relief, of hope, of gratitude. And it was at that moment, seeing a man who had asked for nothing kneel silently before the possibility of a future for his daughter, that Robert also broke down inside. Discreet tears rolled down his cheeks. The agent turned his face away, trying to hide it, but everyone there knew something profound had happened. Soon after, Camila was brought back into the room. When she saw her father free, she ran towards him, and Miguel hugged her as if the whole world fit in that moment. The little girl whispered in his ear, "Let's go home now, Daddy." Miguel, still with tears in his eyes, replied, "Let's go, daughter. Let's build one." Robert watched from afar, silent. What he had heard Miguel say hours earlier would not leave his mind. "She just wants to learn, to be someone better than me." And in that moment he understood that he wasn't just releasing an immigrant, he was releasing a father, He was releasing a story. He was allowing the future, at least for a girl named Camilla, to be different from the past. On the report form, Robert wrote, "Humanitarian risk deserves full review." It was a loophole, a chance, a gesture of humanity hidden between paragraphs of bureaucracy. Outside, the sun was beginning to set on the horizon. Miguel and Camilla still had many challenges ahead of them. But on that day at that airport, everything changed with one simple choice: to listen. And the agent, who had entered that room just to work another shift, left with his heart transformed. A few days passed. Miguel and Camilla were sent to a temporary shelter for asylum seekers. It was simple, with thin walls and modest meals. But for them, it was the beginning of everything. Miguel got a legal advisor, began the formal process of regularization, and started attending English classes on weekends. Camilla, for the first time in her life, received a small backpack with new notebooks, colored pencils, and a badge with her name written correctly. In her first class, when the teacher called Camila Rodriguez, she raised her hand timidly and smiled. It was her first real smile since they left their country. Robert, the agent, returned to work as usual. The routine at the airport continued. More flights, more inspections, more immigrants arriving with eyes full of fear and empty pockets. But something in him had changed. He began to listen more. He began to see people beyond their documents. He began to see stories, not just infractions. One afternoon, on a typical workday, he received a plain envelope on his desk. Inside was a child's drawing. It was a colorful little house with a garden and a big yellow sun in the corner. In the center were two figures holding hands. One was a bearded man, smiling. The other was a little girl with pigtails. At the bottom, in shaky letters, it read, "Thank you for letting my dad stay. Camilla." Robert stood motionless for a few minutes. He took the drawing to his desk drawer but couldn't bring himself to put it away. Instead, he discreetly stuck it on the wall behind his monitor. Whenever someone new arrived, he would say it was a gift from a young passenger. The story of Miguel and Camila didn't make the news. It didn't appear in the newspapers. No one recorded videos or wrote headlines. But in that cold, rigid world of immigration, where numbers matter more than names, two hearts had been touched. A father found hope, a daughter found a future, and an agent rediscovered his own humanity. Months later, at a final hearing, Miguel's asylum request was approved. The judge closed the session by saying, "You did not run from the law, you ran toward love." Miguel thanked her silently, holding Camila's hand tightly. Outside the courtroom, he knelt before his daughter, adjusted her backpack on her shoulders, and said, "Now it's up to you, little one. Make the most of this chance." And she replied, in her sweet voice, "I will, Daddy. One day I'll take care of you." That afternoon they walked home together, a small house but theirs. For the first time, with valid documents, dignity in their hearts, and a new beginning in their eyes. The most difficult journey had already been made, not on maps or across borders, but in the hearts of those who decided to believe. Because, in the end, what separates a number from a life is simply this: listening.